Hello, hello. It's Eileen here, and I've got a quick update that I wanted to be sure to share with you before we dive into today's episode. The Resilience Room membership community is going to open its doors for new members Monday, July 28th through Friday, August 1st. If you've been thinking of joining us and want to be sure to be notified when we open, I want to encourage you to join the waitlist. You can do that at go.eileendevine.com/resilience room. That's go.eileendevine.com/resilience room. We only open our doors for new members a few times per year, so if you've been thinking about joining, this is a great time for you to do that. We would love nothing more than to welcome you into our amazing community. So again, you can find all the details and join the waitlist at go.eileendevine.com/resilience room. Okay, on to the episode. Hey everyone, it's Eileen, and in today's episode, I share the mic with my very first guest, and this guest is a very special one. I sit down with my husband, Dave, to talk with him about his experience of parenting our daughter, Maya. Dave, of course, plays a big role in my life as my husband and partner of more than 20 years, and as the father of our two teenagers. But he also plays a really big role within the Brain First Parenting as a business and a company. He takes care of my website and helps with social media. He edits and produces these podcast episodes. He basically does all of that behind the scenes stuff that is necessary, but those things that I really want nothing to do with if I can help it. And that is what makes it possible for me to focus on the work that I love most, which is being with and supporting parents, as well as the professionals who also care so deeply about parents of complex kids. So I asked Dave if he'd join me because I wanted to highlight a dad's experience, which is so often overlooked in these parenting spaces. He and I have been on this journey together since day one, since the very beginning, this journey of learning what it means to parent a child, and now a teenager, who lives with a serious neurobehavioral condition from a brain first lens. And I wanted to give you the chance to hear a bit from him on his perspective of how it's changed him as a dad, what's been hard about it, where he finds joy and hope as a dad, despite the inherent challenges that come with parenting such a complex child. It's all in this conversation that he and I have. Before we dive into that conversation, I wanted to let you know that at the time of this recording, we are getting ready to open up enrollment for our annual Focus on Fathers program. This is a program I offer only one time per year, and it's specifically for dads of kids with neurobehavioral conditions. So if you are a dad who wants to learn about this approach in the company of other dads who share your lived experience, or if you have a dad in your life who would benefit from something like this, you'll want to go sign up for the waitlist so that you will be notified the moment we open for registration. You can find all the details and the link to the waitlist at go.eileendevine.com/fathers. Again, that's go.eileendevine.com/fathers. And I'll also include that link in the show notes. Okay, on to the episode. I really hope you enjoy this conversation between me and my husband, Dave Devine. Hi there, and welcome to the Brain First Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Eileen Devine, and I am a therapist, parent coach, and educator who supports parents that are raising children, teens, and young adults with brain-based differences and challenging behavioral symptoms. If you are a parent or caregiver of a child who has intense, confusing, relentless, or sometimes even scary behaviors, You are in the right place, and I am so glad you're here. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Brain First Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Eileen Devine, and as I mentioned in my introduction to this episode, I have a very special guest, my first guest, with me today, Dave. So, Dave, they already know a little bit about you because I shared a little bit of who you are in the introduction, but I would love for you to introduce yourself. Tell folks a little bit more about who you are.
Yeah, so I'm Dave. I'm a stay-at-home dad, freelance writer, and I'm also the behind-the-scenes guy for Brain First Parenting. I'm lucky enough to be married to Eileen, who all of you have gotten to know in this podcast, and I'm the proud father of two teenagers, one of whom I think we and society at large would consider neurotypical, but the other, our daughter, who has a significant brain difference that we didn't know about when she was born, but we've learned quite a bit about as she's grown older.
Yeah, quite a bit. That is definitely an accurate statement. So I asked Dave to come on the podcast because it's important to me to highlight the voices of all kinds of parents who are in various roles and situations. And I think dads in particular, we don't hear enough from dads. I do in my one-on-one work. I meet a lot of dads, work with a lot of dads. But in the parenting realm world, we don't hear their voice enough. So I asked Dave to come on. He was gracious enough to share his experience and have this conversation with me. So I am curious, Dave, when you think back to those early days of our parenting, when we had essentially two babies, a 15-month-old, our son Connell, and a newborn, our daughter Maya, what stands out to you about that time period? And specifically, when it was becoming really apparent to you and to I that we were raising a daughter with differences. I don't know that we would have known to call them brain differences, and we certainly didn't know what we know now. But I'm curious if you even realized that what was going on had anything to do with her brain, if you remember it being more about her challenging behaviors. Like, what stands out to you and your experience of that time?
Yeah, I mean, because we had two babies in the house at the same time, a lot of my memories are kind of hazy from that time for sure. But I think we both realized pretty early on that something wasn't quite right with Maya's development. We could tell that she was missing certain benchmarks, and she struggled very early on with like the expected skills that we had kind of observed our own son already hitting. You know,
Mm-hmm.
She struggled to latch onto her bottle.
Yeah.
She struggled really with taking food from a spoon. And those early kind of feeding challenges, I think, were really early indications of bigger challenges down the road.
Yeah. Oh, I remember it would take an hour plus to feed her a whole bottle. We couldn't understand why that was the case. So yeah, that definitely stands out to me.
And we knew, I mean, we both knew that there had been some substance exposure during the pregnancy, that she was born with nicotine in her system from cigarettes and there was cannabis, but we'd had no mention of alcohol at all. And so nonetheless, I think we started to suspect that something might not be quite right just based on the progress that she was or wasn't making. But, you know, I think one really specific moment stands out for me from her infancy, and I think it probably does for you too, that there was a doctor's appointment that we took her in, you know, sort of those check mark doctor's appointments, those benchmark doctor's appointments you have 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, where she had still been really struggling to take the bottle and where she was diagnosed with failure to thrive. Yeah. And I just remember that felt like a really early alarm bell for us and for me in particular. And honestly, I felt like it felt like a bit of an indictment on us and our parenting.
That we were the reason she wasn't thriving, or there was something we were missing, and that's why she was failing to thrive.
Yeah, I mean, I think because we had a healthy 18-month-old son who was certainly thriving, we felt like we knew how to do this parenting thing. You know, we felt like we had this. Right. And I just can still remember there was a really well-meaning nurse who came into the little doctor's office there while we waited, and she offered us a stack of pamphlets on effective parenting. And it was a bit heartbreaking. I can remember.
She was kind of sheepish about it. I think she felt really bad.
But I remember what she said. She said, "I'm sorry, she's just so far behind."
Yeah.
And that was pretty early in her development, so in Maya's development. And so I think for me, that was a real early sign. But we definitely weren't thinking brain difference. We had no idea about like sort of long-term neurodevelopmental challenges or anything like that. And we definitely didn't have words like lagging cognitive skills.
Right.
But that's really what we were witnessing, was she was having these lagging cognitive skills.
Right.
And then, I think as she progressed from infancy to toddlerhood and then beyond all the way up till now as a 16-year-old, I think the challenging behaviors in those kind of toddler years in particular, which initially looked to us like defiance and stubbornness, were really strong signals that her brain was working differently. But I don't think even then we had like the vocabulary to talk about that or to really know what that meant.
Right. Well, and I remember in those toddler years, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before, that what we were seeing with that defiance and that stubbornness at, say, 3 and 4 years old, we knew it was different. But a lot of the reaction we got from well-meaning people around us was, well, that's just a really tough age. I mean, kids are that way at this age. And we knew, no, this is different.
And I think for sure I was, and I think probably we both were, still really seeing it through a behavioral lens. We didn't have that word either necessarily, the behavioral lens, but we were definitely believing that there was some like intentionality, a clear agency behind her most difficult behaviors, that she was, doing those things intentionally. She was choosing to do them either to us or to her older brother. And I think we thought, I did at the time, that like with enough guidance and love and like the occasional consequences, that we could teach her not to, quote, make those choices.
Right. We were pretty focused on her behavior. And, what I often talk about with parents is focusing on behavior and wanting it to change as a parent isn't bad. It doesn't mean you're a terrible parent doing something abusive, right? You're doing the only thing that you know how, and you can do that in compassionate and loving ways. It's just not going to be a great use of your energy because it's not going to get the results that you hoped it would. And I can definitely remember times in our early parenting where that was definitely the case.
And then I think too, like even once we received a diagnosis of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, FASD, we weren't offered that many resources. There was very little that actually spoke to our parenting experience. So much of it was just focused on what we could expect from Maya's development.
Right, which wasn't positive.
No.
What I remember was reading books that said a loving, supportive environment is important. And I thought, well, we've got that covered. And it's still not working very well. But then side by side with that was all of the things that she was at risk for in her life, and especially her teens and her young adult life.
Yeah, and it painted a really grim picture, I feel like. I can remember, just like you probably, starting to read one of those books, and I set it down because it was just too depressing.
Yeah.
Everything seemed really predictive and inevitable, like this is what will happen.
Yep.
This is the ways your child will be difficult and really in their teen years will go off the rails. And I guess when I think back to that, to now, and I think like she's now 16, the age at which so many very negative projections were included in that book. And her life has gone in a very different direction because of what we've learned about kind of that model of what eventually became the brain first parenting model. And I think a big piece of that was, fortunately, tucked in among the very few resources that we were offered was the mention of a book by a woman named Diane Malbin, which I think eventually really became a lifeline for us.
Yeah. I've talked about Diane before on this podcast, and she wrote the book Trying Differently Rather Than Harder. And she was a mentor for me when I first started shifting my lens in my parenting, but then also wanting to do this work with parents. And I remember being at her training as a parent, and so being brand new to this information and learning about what Maya's brain could not do that I assumed it could do, and just feeling very hopeful with that information, but also feeling really bad that I had made these assumptions. And I remember texting you and giving you a little snippet of what I had learned. And you said, it just makes me feel terrible to think we were expecting things of her that she had no capacity to do. Right. And I think that is really, well, not I think, I know that is where things really begin to shift for us.
Yeah. And I also feel like that experience of regret, of looking back to the time before you had this information, is an experience a lot of parents go through, kind of that shame of, man, I spent those years or those months or most of their childhood in some cases not knowing we could have been doing things differently.
Right, right. Well, and that's, why you and I are both so committed to this work, right? We've talked about that before, that it truly does transform lives and families. We've experienced it firsthand, but it reduces suffering. And you can't blame yourself for not having information that you didn't even know you were missing, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious, we have these traditional ideas or images about, well, for you about fatherhood, and for parents in general about parenting, for moms about motherhood. But for fatherhood specifically, are there things that you over the years have realized you had to let go of as it relates to parenting Maya?
Yeah. I think for both of our kids, I've tried not to impose too much on that relationship, my own ideas about what I think fatherhood will be like or what fatherhood should be in relation to them. But I've really tried to let their interests and the stuff they get excited about guide me in terms of where we're going to go with that father-child relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think there are some societal ideas about being, quote, a girl dad
Mm-hmm.
that really do get ingrained and create expectation. And in my case, I think you end up thinking about all the ways that some of that has to be let go
Mm-hmm.
because there are just developmental milestones that are never met. Like we have a teenager at home, but she is so much younger in so many ways.
Yeah.
So
we're not doing the typical teenage stuff with her most of
no.
the time.
Yeah.
She still wants to play imaginary play with her stuffed animals, right?
Very much so, yeah. And there's definitely a joy that comes with that too. But, I think ideas of coaching her in youth sports or taking her on a daddy-daughter date, those things are impacted a lot by her brain differences,
Yeah.
Like this year at her high school, we didn't go to the father-daughter dance at the high school she attends because, as she said, it would have been too loud for her.
Yeah.
And even just talking to her about it, she would get dysregulated. So I think for me, a big piece of it has been learning to work within her rigidity a little bit, her avoidance, and particularly her sensory avoidance.
Yeah.
And just the things she's very particular about. It makes for a different kind of relationship than you might have expected. But I would say too, like even before I started staying home in 2017, when I kind of started transition to being a freelance writer and being home with the kids, I didn't really see myself in a traditional dad role, but more as someone who just tries to approach the role of being a father with a lot of curiosity, essentially asking our kids, like, what do you need from me in order to be a good dad to you?
Yeah. And that, I will say, my experience of being a parenting partner with you is that comes really naturally. I know that you work really hard at it, but you're a playful person. You're very patient. You're very flexible. And that has helped me as a mom, right, to become more playful, more flexible, more patient. But yeah, that idea, what do you need from me in order for me to be a good dad to you? It really does take shedding some of those ideas that you thought that might have meant before you have your unique child in front of you.
Yeah, it definitely flips it a little bit because instead of saying, these are the things I'm going to do to be a good dad for you, it's kind of asking either explicitly or just sort of paying attention and observing to find out what is it you actually need from me in order to be the best kind of version of yourself and then for me to be the best father to you. And I would say some of that comes from my training as a teacher. I spent some years as a high school and then as a college teacher. And I feel like in my training as an educator, asking myself a lot of times, how can I be the best teacher? I kept coming back to that answer of it's really by learning from my students, letting them teach me what they need from a teacher so that I can kind of be the best, how I can show up as the best teacher for them.
Mm-hmm. Right. I know probably every parent listening right now would love to have a teacher like that because we always talk about that curiosity and that openness. That's where all the good stuff is, right? It allows our kids to be who they are and requires us to meet them where they are.
Oh, it's true. And I feel like I always do say that both of our kids, but Maya for sure, has been the greatest teacher of my life. I have learned so much from being her dad that I think of her as a teacher as much as
my goodness.
Me teaching her.
We would not be sitting here recording this podcast.
It's true.
If it wasn't for her being our greatest teacher.
Yeah,
that's right. What would you say has been the steepest part of the learning curve for you personally? So the learning curve as it relates to parenting Maya in this very different, non-traditional way from this brain first lens? Like, what has been your steepest part of that learning curve?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like we've just discussed, I feel like I have some of the instincts that kind of feed pretty well into the brain first lens. But I think, like most people, my biggest learning curve, or the steepest part of the learning curve, has just probably been actually remembering to see Maya through a brain first lens
Right.
when it's most needed.
Yeah.
So it's easy to kind of think about, well, when everything's going smoothly and there's no disruptions, that we're kind of in this brain first parenting approach. But it's like during those moments of heightened emotions,
Yes.
lots of annoyance, big frustrations. And in those times, it's really easy to slide back into the behavioral lens and respond by lashing out with words or emotions that sort of match or meet that heightened situation.
Right.
Instead of seeing the behaviors that are frustrating as symptoms of a brain that works differently.
Right, right. Yeah, I think everyone listening can relate to that. It's especially when you have a child who appears so neurotypical in many ways. And, sometimes I think in our situation, there are moments when Maya appears neurotypical, meaning she reminds you of the age she is chronologically. But it doesn't take much time with Maya to realize, like, oh, okay, something's different here, right? Strangers at the store, for example, can pick up on that in a very short amount of time. But there's lots of parents where that's not the case. Their kids look and appear and act very neurotypical. And so for them, that learning curve is very steep, remembering that their child has this invisible but very serious brain-based difference, and that we are going to have our visceral reactions to some of their symptoms. And so recognizing when that's happening and trying to get some space there, right? That's what I'm talking with parents all the time about, because it really is that hard.
We all the time talk about having to extend ourselves some grace too, that I can think of specific instances where I got frustrated or blew up or yelled or something. And I think, like, well, I messed up again. Like
right.
I edit the blogs. I edit the podcasts.
This information.
I know this stuff. I am very much in it, and I forget. And it's not forgetting. It's just kind of, it's being caught up in the moments that are the hard moments. Yeah.
I mean, right. It really is. It's being human.
I think a big piece then for me is always kind of trying to stay emotionally regulated enough that I can help co-regulate Maya in times when she's really struggling.
Yeah.
And some of that, again, I think goes back to my background in education. I do think that helps. Teaching 7 periods of 9th grade social studies, you learn a lot about patience and how to creatively redirect challenging behaviors and being playful and all of those things that I think I use all the time with Maya now. One thing that I do think makes this learning curve even steeper from the perspective of a parent, from a dad in particular, is that so many of the modern parenting spaces that we spend time in, I guess, whether that's books or blogs or support groups or podcasts or whatever it might be, they're really not directed at fathers.
Yeah.
So it's a very kind of mom-centric experience to head out into those spaces, to get online and look up whether it's advice or suggestions or what have you.
Right.
I mean, I think already it's true that, like, the online spaces that dads spend their time in are not typically ones in which people are discussing what it means to parent kids who live with brain-based conditions.
Right.
If I'm scrolling on my phone, I'm probably going to like a news site or ESPN, something to do with sports or writing. But if I do go looking for parenting advice or support, I definitely don't usually see myself reflected in that experience.
That's right. That's right. It's, I talk a lot about the importance of community and how we know from the research that we need to be in connection with people who truly see us and hear us. And there's different parts of us, right? In different parts of our life. We have different people for different parts of our life. But when parenting, I mean, that is such a huge part of our identity. And for any of us, if we don't have a group that can do that for us, truly see us and hear us, there's going to be some isolation there, some loneliness, possibly depression. I mean, it really, really does matter. It's so, so important. And I think it's hard for dads to find that kind of connection just in general in our society. But this added layer of complexity makes it, well, when I hear from dads, they talk about it as just nearly being impossible to find.
Well, and I've got good guy friends,
Yeah, yeah.
but
Mhm.
but they're wonderful guys, but they don't share my experience. When I
Right.
talk about things that happen at our house, or if I kind of go into it all, any challenges that Maya might be experiencing, they're supportive, they're encouraging, but
They're
they
doing
don't.
the best they
They're doing the
can.
best they can,
Yes.
but they're not my
Mhm.
people. They're not. They don't share that lived experience.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So, what are some, we talk a lot about deeply held beliefs and values and how those can, well, not can, they do come up in our parenting, and they can clash with who our child is and their unique neurobiology and what maybe they can't do that we thought they could do, those sorts of things. And so I'm wondering what some deeply held beliefs and values about being a quote unquote good dad have shifted for you over time as a result of parenting, well, a now teenager who has a significant brain difference and sometimes behavioral symptoms that can clash with those beliefs and values.
Yeah. I mean, I think you well know I'm fortunate that I grew up with two great parents that I still have a really close relationship with today.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, since we're talking specifically about dads, I was really lucky. And still am lucky to have a father who I think would certainly qualify as a good dad.
Yeah, and a great father-in-law.
And a great father-in-law, wonderful grandfather to our
Yep.
kids, who modeled loving, connected parenting to me when I was growing up.
Yeah.
I mean, I think as you also know, I come from a big Irish Catholic family out on the East Coast. We definitely were the kind of family that didn't say "I love you" a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but it was the kind of family where you knew you were loved. You felt that embrace. It
Yeah.
just wasn't. It didn't come to the fore necessarily.
It was through actions more than those direct words.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So I would say, definitely my initial ideas about parenting probably also came from that traditional upbringing. This was the 1970s. It was the early 1980s in an Irish Catholic family. So consequences were typically delivered through some of what I think you describe in your workshops as reaching for our power.
Yes.
Which are very common parenting approaches or techniques that folks of our generation experienced growing up,
Yeah. Our generation and other generations.
Yeah, and many people experience today.
Yeah, it's all that many of us know.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that'd be like things like a raised voice, really harsh or scolding language, restricting privileges, threatening punishments, or being grounded.
Yep.
I remember being grounded as a kid. And so all of those things, I think, definitely are things I carried with me into my role as a father.
Yeah. Right.
Whether I wanted to bring all of them with me or not, they're there and they're part of my experience.
Yeah.
So I think as a dad, even what I hope is a pretty self-aware dad, I've had to grow out of some of those deeply ingrained ideas about how to, quote, raise kids,
Yes.
particularly with Maya. But even with her brother, so much of that stuff doesn't work, or it's
Right.
ineffective, or it doesn't necessarily lead to the closeness and the connection that we're looking for.
Right, right. When you take a step back to think about what your priorities are, and I know that many parents, they don't have a prompt in their life that makes them do this. I feel like you and I did. Like, what are our priorities in parenting our two kids? Because we have one child who needs such intense and such different parenting. And if relationship and connection is the highest priority, which for you and I it is, and I know for many parents, they would say the same thing, then those reaching for your power techniques that really value compliance above all else, they're not going to get you there. They're not going to get you to that goal.
Being a good dad to Maya has meant learning those strategies and those approaches that allow us to build connection and understanding between us rather than just compliance from Maya. And those techniques, those strategies, that's all what's embedded in that brain first parenting approach.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I think about the parents who I've talked to about reaching for their power and what that looks like and why that happens, there is always fear underneath that reaction, right? They want to get their child to behave because they are so worried about their child if they continue to behave this way, in whatever challenging way that is, Like, what does that mean for their life? What does that mean for them as they get older? And similarly, when they start to learn about how their child's brain works so differently and the skills that they're lagging behind in, there's also worry there. Like, okay, I see it. And there's hopefulness and relief in that. And also there's a lot of sadness, like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. And there's worry there. So I'm wondering, what do you worry about as a dad as it relates to Maya specifically?
So many things. But
Let's do your top five.
Yeah. One, I think we share this memory, but one really clear memory that I have, and I think it was Connell's birthday party when he was quite young, but kind of during a break in the birthday celebration, we were just having a conversation, and there was a family member at the birthday party who, Maya was still really young. I mean, she might have been 3 or 4 years old,
I remember,
probably.
yeah.
But I just remember her very clearly saying, "Do you think she'll ever live independently?"
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it still kind of elicits a bit of a visceral reaction in me, but I can recall kind of being, and apologies for the way things have turned out. It's different later, but I can just recall being angry at that question at the time.
Yeah.
I felt like it was really presumptuous and maybe kind of limiting in terms of what was possible for Maya's development. And so I just remember that question really landing like a lead weight, like, would she ever live independently?
Yeah.
But then I can remember too, kind of walking away later that evening and thinking, wait, is she not going to be able to live independently?
Yeah.
And that, again, so more than a decade ago. But it turned out to be a fairly prescient question, a fairly kind of predictive question, because what we've discovered as Maya has grown older and as she's now, a teenager, is that she will likely not ever live independently.
Yeah.
She will always need scaffolding and support in her life.
Yeah.
And really close contact with people who will help guide her and help to take care of her.
Yeah.
So I worry about that. I worry about what her adult years will look like. When I think about the worries I have, it's often about whether we'll always be able to take care of her. Who will take care of her if we're not here?
Yeah.
How do we ensure she has the best people around her? And when I kind of get down into the specifics of it, I think I worry about her vulnerability in relationships, certainly with strangers, anything related to financial matters. And just how vulnerable she seems to be even now out in the wider world.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I often say she's a mature 8-year-old navigating high school.
Yes.
And she understands the world as an 8-year-old or sometimes even younger would. So very innocent. And there's a sweetness in that, but yeah, there's some legitimate fears
right
with that too.
Yeah, and I know this does sound a bit heavy, but I really worry that this awesome person, this young woman who is so loving and so deserving of love, and really, I mean, we both know at this point at 16, but like so badly wants to experience romantic love, once that relationship, but that she'll struggle to find a companion or a partner, not just like to be with her, but someone who can really like authentically love her back in a way that feels equal and reciprocal. I think about that a lot.
Yeah.
With Maya.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I do too. I appreciate all those. You and I mean, we talk a lot about that, a lot about these things. So that doesn't surprise me, but still talking through them, it does feel heavy, right? So let's shift a little bit then. What are some unexpected joys that you've experienced as her father, who lives with these differences? And the reason I wanted to ask you about this is because I think I know that you and I truly delight in Maya. And I don't know that any parent delights in their kids 100% of the time, but we delight in her in a way that I hope every parent I work with can imagine, right? I hold that hope for them because it is possible. And I think it's important to talk about that there can be joy and there can be delight in this parenting experience. So I'm curious what that is for you.
Oh man, so many. I definitely know more about horses than I ever expected to.
It's one of my special interests.
Yeah, well, I've followed it. I've followed her passion.
You have.
So, I mean, I do think I'm someone who looks for the joy in things. And so I've tried especially hard, I think, to try to find the joy in parenting and to really be present to it when it's happening, and not let those moments just slip past either, but sort of really try to be in those moments when I can. I think, the biggest joy for me is trying hard to kind of see the world through Maya's eyes.
Yeah.
And so asking her to tell me how she experiences things, because it is so different than the way I do.
That's right.
And she and I, because of that, just kind of asking those questions, I feel like we have great conversations about this. And those conversations, we often laugh a lot. Those conversations can really turn playful and kind of lead to her imagination, taking us down different stories and things like that, all of which for me, I think, ends up feeling joyful. Just being able to see the world through her eyes and really challenging her to articulate that to us too.
Yeah.
You could imagine a child with Maya's challenges going through life without people very often asking her, how do you experience the world? Tell me what it's like for you.
Yeah. And her ability to do that, to articulate that, has just gotten better over time. There was a time when I think she had a hard time doing that, but we kept asking the question. And as she's matured and as her skills grown, she's been able to better articulate that to us.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like she's getting so much better at that. And so in the kind of context of those conversations, we go on walks and we go on hikes together. We listen to music together. She's got her Spotify playlist that she shares with us. We play stuffed animals, even as a 16-year-old. We make silly videos. And yeah, we visit the various horses at the stables that she goes to, where she gets to be the expert. Yeah. And she gets to introduce me to the horses and tell me about each one, which is awesome. So those are all times I think that are filled with joy. I would say that one of the most important messages I'd want people to come away from if they're listening to this is that parenting a child or a teenager with significant brain differences and pretty heavy, pretty seriously challenging behavioral symptoms, like you said, it can be filled with joy.
Yeah.
That fatherhood experience can be joy-filled. And absolutely, there are times with deep frustration, even despair. But all of the joy that I found in being a dad to Maya and to Connell has come from approaching it with curiosity about how they experience the world and then just looking for opportunities for greater connection. And so I think it's been a great experience to work on this Brain First Parenting project, because that lens, I think, is perfect for both of those things. It encourages curiosity and it pushes us always for connection rather than consequences.
Yeah. We're lucky that we have this work, right?
We are.
It keeps us grounded, keeps us honest, and always looking at, how we can do better, right? I say to parents all the time that, learning to parent from a brain first lens, it's not a one and done thing. There really isn't a finish line. That it is this ongoing process of deepening your understanding of your child over time, right? Who they are, how their brain works, how their nervous system works at this stage in their life. And for me, that felt heavy at first, but there's been some relief in that I have time, that it's an ongoing process that I can get better at. It doesn't have to happen overnight, because that's not possible. So, all right, Dave, I think this is a great note to end on, the joys.
I agree.
That are possible. Thank you for being here, my first guest. I appreciate it.
It's only going up from here.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for listening in. And until next time, take care. Before I say goodbye, I wanted to be sure to let you know that this isn't the only way that we can stay in touch. Every week, I pop into the inbox of thousands of other parents just like you with a short note that's focused on various aspects of this unique parenting experience. If that sounds like something that would be helpful to you, you can join my email list by going to my website, eileendevine.com.